I watched a man lose everything after 25 years of loyalty. The next week, 70% of his clients walked out and followed me. They say karma takes its time, but sometimes it moves fast. One decision, one silence, one betrayal. That's all it took. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't even angry at first. Just numb. But when his empire began to collapse, one client at a time, I realized something. The trust he threw away had never really belonged to him. It had always been mine. And if you've ever watched someone who called you family quietly let you burn, you'll understand why I didn't stop them when it was his turn to fall. I started at Cordell Advisory Group on a cold January morning, fresh out of DePaul, wearing the only blazer I owned and shoes that pinched my heels. I was 22, nervous, and had no real idea how money moved through the world, just that I wanted to understand it, command it, maybe even reshape it. I'd grown up in a second-floor walk-up on the South Side. My mother raised me and my brother alone, working back-to-back shifts at a laundromat and a hospital kitchen. Money wasn't something we had, it was something that evaded us, that we spoke of only when the power bill showed up with red lettering or when groceries were too light for the week. So I chased it, not for greed, but for security, for dignity, for the silence that comes when you don't have to think about what's missing. Cordell Advisory was small back then. 12 employees total. The lobby had flickering lights and an ancient carpet that smelled like mildew. But to me, it felt like a cathedral. A place where people in suits talked about estate structures and long-term projections like they were planning the architecture of empires. And in the middle of it all stood Braden Cordell, the co-founder. Towering presence, silver temples, always in a navy suit, always with his sleeves rolled exactly one fold past his elbows. He had that polished calm, the kind that made clients lean in and secretaries speak in hushed tones around him. I was assigned to him as an assistant analyst, and he barely spoke to me for the first 2 weeks. I remember thinking, he's a wall. I'll never get through it. But then, one day, I caught a mistake in a client's portfolio. Nothing massive, but enough to trigger a tax penalty. I flagged it, printed the report, and left it on his desk with a sticky note. Review Section 3B. Numbers don't match Q4 deductions. I don't know what made him look. Maybe curiosity. Maybe boredom. But the next morning, he called me into his office. He didn't thank me. He just nodded once and said, "Good eye. Sit. Let's walk through it." That was the beginning. From that day on, he started pulling me into client meetings. At first, I sat in silence, taking notes. But over time, he'd glance at me mid-discussion and ask, "Surrealists, what do you think?" And I would answer, carefully, thoughtfully. I never faked knowledge. I learned. I studied at night, took certification classes on weekends, mastered every niche financial product he ever mentioned offhand. Within 5 years, I wasn't just a shadow. I was his second pair of eyes. The one who kept quarterly reports clean. The one who'd call clients at midnight during a market crash to calm them down. The one who remembered birthdays and divorces and grandchildren's names. Braden never said it, but I knew he trusted me. More than he did the other partners. More than he probably trusted himself. He called me his quiet compass. And I wore that like a badge. I didn't chase promotions. I didn't network at mixers or cling glasses at firm retreats. That wasn't my way. I was there before sunrise and left after everyone else had gone. I ate my lunch at my desk and spent client anniversaries handwriting notes. I built my reputation in silence. And maybe that's why I didn't see the shift when it started happening. It began slowly, like most betrayals do. But before that, there was trust. There was warmth. There was a night, 6 years ago, when my world crumbled. My husband of 12 years left me. Just packed a bag and walked out. No warning. No screaming. Just the quiet sentence. "I think I missed my window for a different life." I remember sitting at the office the next morning, staring at the glowing screen, pretending to work. Braden walked by and paused. He didn't ask anything, just put a coffee down next to me and said, "You can crash in the West Conference room if you need to scream into a pillow. No judgment." And I did. For 10 minutes. Then I came back and finished a retirement projection for the McAllister estate. After that, he checked in once a week, not directly. Just little things. I added you to the firm's private healthcare plan. Here's an extra day off. Don't argue. Your input saved that deal. I hope you know that. I did know, but it mattered that he said it. He never crossed lines. Never made it weird. It wasn't like that. He was older, married, emotionally removed in that way only men trained by Wall Street could be. But he saw me. And sometimes, that was enough to keep me going. That's what made it all harder to understand later. That's what made the silence so much louder when things began to change. The first time I saw Cade Haldeman, he was in the break room with his shoes on the table. Italian leather, pristine white soles, the kind that said, "I haven't earned dirt yet." He was young, mid-30s at most, too polished, too smooth. Looked like he'd stepped out of a glossy magazine ad for venture capital. He laughed loudly, the kind of laugh that demands to be noticed. And people did notice him. The admin team called him Shiny Suit. The IT guy said, "He walks like he's already in charge." But what unsettled me wasn't how he acted, it was how quickly he moved. In his first month, he met with every senior partner. His second, he was given a private client list. By the third, he had Braden's ear more often than I did. I told myself it didn't mean anything. I never needed to be center stage. I wasn't threatened by flash. I was grounded in legacy. My value was my record, not my volume. Still, I noticed the meetings that used to include me now didn't. I noticed when a client of mine, someone I'd worked with for 9 years, called the office and was transferred to Cade without my knowledge. When I asked Braden, he just said, "He's helping streamline coverage. Lighten your load a bit." But my load didn't feel lighter. It felt hollow, like a piece had been silently carved out without me noticing. The final straw wasn't dramatic.
It was ordinary.
Forgettable. I came into the office early one Monday. My habit. Lights were still off. I poured coffee, walked past Braden's office, and paused. The door was ajar. Inside, I saw Cade sitting at the desk, Braden's desk, flipping through client folders. I froze. He looked up, smiled, and said, "Early bird gets the empire, huh?" I laughed politely, but something sank in my chest. He wasn't just helping.
He was settling in.
Later that week, Braden avoided my questions again, redirected conversations, gave vague feedback about my fit with the firm's evolving vision. I remember looking at my own hands that night as I typed emails and ran spreadsheets. They felt foreign. These hands had built something, quietly, steadily. And yet suddenly, they were being ignored, as if they no longer mattered. As if the walls I helped hold up didn't need me anymore. And that's when it hit me. I was no longer an asset. I was a relic. I could feel the air shift around me in meetings, the silence when I spoke, the glances exchanged behind my back, the subtle way people started avoiding eye contact in the hallway. Cade had taken my seat, not just physically but symbolically. And Braden, he let him. Not a word. Not a warning. Just the gradual fade of inclusion, like I was being erased in real time. And still, I try to hold on. Because that's what loyalty does. It blinds you. You hope that history means something. That 25 years of quiet sacrifice can't be outpaced by 6 months of charm. But loyalty, I've learned, is a dangerous currency when you're the only one still spending it. I felt something shift. Like my loyalty had started counting against me. And when I looked at Braden across the conference table that last time, his hands folded, eyes cold, flanked by Cade like a throne room, I knew. The man who once handed me coffee after heartbreak was gone. And in his place was someone willing to bury me to preserve his own silence. I thought I had time. I thought the shift at Cordell Advisory was just a phase. A storm that would pass. But storms don't always pass. Sometimes, they drown everything in their path. The weeks that followed the day I caught Cade at Braden's desk were like a slow-motion unraveling, each moment peeling away more than I expected, each conversation a dagger wrapped in polite smiles. It started with clients. At first, it was subtle. A casual remark from a client during a routine portfolio review. "Surrealis, I've been meaning to ask, have you met the new partner, Cade? Heard he's shaking things up." I nodded and smiled. Yes, he's new but eager. But their eyes shifted away. Their tone hinted at something else, something unspoken. And then the calls began, clients I'd nurtured for years, reaching out after hours, asking questions that usually only I would know how to answer. When I answered, their voices were hesitant, guarded. Surrealists. I wanted to check in about my account, but someone else has been handling things. Is this change permanent? I didn't know what to say, because every time I asked Braden or Cade, I was met with vague reassurances or, worse, silence. One Friday afternoon, I stayed late, sifting through account files, trying to understand how my clients were suddenly slipping away. That's when I noticed it. Letters of engagement signed over to Cade's name. Documents I hadn't been copied on. Meeting minutes where my input was recorded but never acted on. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional, calculated, and merciless. I went to Braden. Braden, what's happening? Why am I being sidelined? He looked tired, older, like the weight of years sat on his shoulders heavier than I'd ever seen. I'm sorry, Surrealists. It's out of my hands now. I stared at him, my heart breaking in silence. Out of his hands? After 25 years of building this firm, he just let it slip? I realized then that Braden wasn't just fading out of the firm. He was retreating. And Cade was taking over. It wasn't just the clients or meetings. It was the subtle poison in the office air. The whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by. The sideways glances during team lunches. Even the assistant who used to greet me with a warm smile now barely looked up. But what hurt most was the silence from Braden, the man who had once been my anchor. One night, I found myself staring at the firm's directory on the wall, the names etched in brass. Braden Cordell, founder. Cade Halden, junior partner. Surrealis Vaughn, senior associate. Junior partner. I felt the weight of that title like a punch in the gut. I wasn't junior. Not in loyalty, not in experience, not in heart. But titles mattered here. They decided who got to sit at the table and who was left in the hallway. One evening, after everyone had left, I lingered in the conference room. I pulled out my phone and began recording, a habit I'd picked up over the years. Not to be paranoid, but to protect myself. I started dictating quietly, as if telling my own story would somehow make sense of the chaos. I'm Surrealist Vaughn. I've given 25 years to this firm, to Braden. I believed in him, in us. And now I'm watching as my work, my clients, my loyalty vanish. A sound at the door startled me. It was Cade. He smiled, that practiced, polished smile. Burning the midnight oil again, Surrealist? I swallowed hard, just trying to catch up. He stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. I know this transition is hard, but the firm is evolving. Braden's vision was brilliant for its time, but it's time to move forward. You should try to move forward with us. His words were coated with honey, but his eyes were steel. I'm not going anywhere. He shrugged. You don't have a choice.
It was the first time he said it outright.
No longer just whispered threats or side comments. The war was no longer quiet. I spent the next days researching, digging through old contracts, client correspondence, anything that could give me leverage. But Cade was thorough. Every document was locked down. Every conversation recorded. The more I fought, the more I realized how isolated I'd become. Even the team I once considered friends kept their distance. Until one afternoon, when a message popped up on my phone. It was from Lily Park. Lily had been one of my earliest clients, an artist who trusted me with her retirement fund. Her message was brief. Surrealist, can we meet? I have something important to tell you. My heart jumped. When we met at a quiet cafe, she looked nervous. I don't know how to say this, but many of us feel betrayed. The firm's changed. Cade's different. She hesitated. Some of us want to follow you. The words hit me like a wave. Clients, my clients, wanted to leave the firm that was betraying me. But it wasn't that simple. Following me meant risking everything.
Jobs. Stability.
Investments. It was dangerous. But it was also hope. Hope that someone who had been loyal, who had fought for them in storms, would stand for them now. And just like that, my quiet fight became a public battle. Word spread. Clients who had been silent started calling, emailing. Some to confirm, some to confess, and some to plan, to leave. 70%. That number echoed in my mind like a heartbeat. 70% of Braden's clients walking away, following me. I wasn't sure if it was victory or disaster. Because with every step they took toward me, I felt the weight of responsibility crushing down. These weren't just numbers or accounts. These were people's lives, their futures. And if I failed them now, there would be no second chances. Then came the threats. Anonymous emails, subtle warnings. Drop this fight, Surrealists. You'll regret it. At first, I was scared. But then I remembered every late night, every sacrifice. Every moment Braden had believed in me. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every client who'd trusted me, for every colleague who'd looked up to me, for the legacy Braden and I had built together, and for my own dignity. So I stood taller. I spoke louder. I refused to be erased. But the deeper I went, the more Cade fought back. The firm's board convened emergency meetings. Rumors of a restructuring circulated. And one day, I was called into a meeting I dreaded. Braden, Cade, and the board sat at the long table, their faces unreadable. Surrealists, Braden began, voice low. We appreciate your years of service. But the firm is moving in a new direction. Cade added smoothly, your position has been eliminated. I blinked, stared at them like they were speaking a different language. Effective immediately. My mind raced. 25 years. Gone in an instant. No warning. No negotiation. Just a cold dismissal. But even as the words sank in, I felt something else rise up inside me. A fierce, burning resolve. Because while they could take my job, they couldn't take my history. They couldn't erase the trust I'd built. And they had no idea what was coming next. It happened faster than I could have anticipated. I thought they were cutting me off, severing all ties, but they underestimated one thing, the bonds I had built over 25 years. When the door slammed behind me that day, the day they fired me, it wasn't just the end of my career at Cordell Advisory. It was the moment everything changed. I didn't crumble. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I took a breath. And I planned. I had a list. A list of 70% of Braden's clients who had quietly confided in me, clients who trusted me more than the firm, more than Cade Halden. I remembered every conversation, every meeting, every late-night call I had answered for them. They were more than just numbers. They were people. People who deserved better. I began with a call I never thought I'd make. To Braden. I need your help, I said softly, barely recognizing my own voice. He was hesitant at first. Fearful, maybe. I'm no longer part of the firm, I reminded him. But you built this. We built this. And they're about to lose everything they've worked for if we let this continue. His silence was long. Then, finally, he said, what do you need me to do? Together, we started quietly, gathering evidence of Cade's reckless decisions, his manipulation of client funds, the shady contracts he signed behind closed doors. I sifted through documents, emails, financial records, anything that exposed his incompetence and greed. The deeper we dug, the worse it looked. Cade wasn't just ambitious. He was dangerous. He'd been siphoning client accounts, padding fees, pushing risky investments to line his own pockets. And the board had turned a blind eye, blinded by the promise of new money and flash. I compiled everything, prepared myself for the battle ahead. But the hardest part was reaching out to the clients. They had to know the truth. I called them one by one, listening to their shock, their anger, their fear. I'm sorry, I told them all. I should have been there sooner. They believed me. Not because I begged or pleaded, but because my years of loyalty spoke louder than any sales pitch. The calls grew louder. The support became undeniable. One client, a hedge fund manager named Elisa Grant, took the lead, organizing a coalition of investors ready to demand accountability. The tide was turning. Cade tried to push back, threatening lawsuits. spreading rumors that I was the one causing instability. But the truth was a tidal wave, impossible to stop. At a board meeting, armed with evidence and a coalition of clients, I confronted Cade. His confident facade cracked. He stammered, trying to explain away the numbers, the discrepancies. But I had facts. I had witnesses. And most importantly, I had justice. The board voted unanimously to remove Cade from the firm. It was a moment of triumph, but not without cost. Braden, exhausted and betrayed, announced his retirement. The firm I had once called home was forever changed. But from the ashes, something new was born. With the clients who had followed me, I launched a new consulting practice, one built on transparency, trust, and true partnership. It wasn't easy. The first months were a whirlwind of late nights, tough conversations, and moments of doubt. But every time I wanted to quit, I remembered why I started. To fight for what's right. To honor the loyalty that was never truly mine to lose. The clients who stood by me grew in number, and our firm became a beacon for those disillusioned by corporate greed. And in that struggle, I found more than success. I found my voice, my power, my purpose. Looking back, the betrayal felt like a wound, deep and painful. But the healing? That came from standing tall, from reclaiming what was stolen, and from knowing that sometimes the darkest moments reveal the brightest paths. So, to anyone listening, if you've ever been pushed out, betrayed, or underestimated, know this. You are not alone. And sometimes, losing everything is the beginning of winning it all. When I finally closed the door behind me on that chapter of my life, it wasn't just the end of a job. It was the end of a way of seeing myself. I spent the first few nights after launching the new firm in a silence, so thick it felt like a physical presence. Alone in my small apartment downtown, surrounded by packed boxes and unopened mail, I questioned everything. Who was I without Cordell Advisory? Without Braden's approval, without the security of a paycheck, without the familiar hum of the office lights and the clatter of keyboards? But slowly, as the days passed, something else emerged. A quiet strength that I hadn't recognized before. The strength of survival. The strength of new beginnings. The clients who followed me weren't just names on a spreadsheet anymore. They were partners in a vision of what financial consulting should be. Transparent. Honest. Compassionate. We weren't perfect, and we faced hurdles I hadn't imagined. Regulatory challenges, fierce competition, the constant pressure of proving ourselves. But every challenge was a reminder of why we fought so hard. One afternoon, Elisa Grant, the hedge fund manager who had rallied so many clients, called me. "I don't know if you realize it, Cyrillus," she said, voice steady but filled with emotion, "but you changed the game. Not just for us, but for everyone who's been burned by the old ways." Her words stayed with me, because I hadn't just won a battle against a corrupt partner. I had sparked a movement. In the months that followed, we grew steadily. Our team expanded carefully, choosing people who shared our values, who understood that trust wasn't just earned once, it had to be nurtured every day. And with growth came new responsibilities. One evening, I sat in my office, late as usual, reflecting on how far we'd come. The city lights outside flickered against the windows, a reminder that the world kept turning, indifferent to individual triumphs or defeats. But I was no longer indifferent. I had learned that the fight for justice wasn't a single moment of victory. It was a lifelong commitment. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Braden. "Thank you, Cyrillus, for everything." I smiled softly. No longer the mentor or the protector, but an equal, one who had taken up the mantle and carried it forward. Sometimes, when I look back on those dark days, I still feel the sting of betrayal, the ache of being cast aside like a worn tool. But I also feel gratitude for the clarity it gave me, for the fire it ignited, for the community it helped build. And now, when I speak to others who feel lost, who feel betrayed by the people or institutions they trusted most, I tell them this. Your worth isn't defined by those who try to diminish you. Your strength is found in how you rise after the fall. And sometimes, the very people who turn their backs are the ones who unwittingly push you toward your greatest victory. So I ask you, if you've ever been betrayed, pushed out, or underestimated, what will you do next? Will you stay silent, or will you rise? Because sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another. And in that beginning lies your true power. If you've been through something similar, I want to hear your story. What kept you going? How did you turn your darkest moment into your brightest? Leave a comment below, because no one should have to fight alone. This is Surrealist Spawn's story, a story of loyalty, betrayal, and redemption. A story that proves, even after losing everything, sometimes you can gain more than you ever imagined.